Okay. Hello.
Hi, how are ya?
I'm okay.
Good.
All right. Question number 1. Where does our family come from, and how do you know this?
Our family comes from Lithuania and Hungary on one side of the family, and on the other side of the family, it's Germany, Russia, and Poland.
How do you know this?
So, how do I know it? From family stories and from some of the historical information that we have, some of the birth records and family trees.
All right. Number 2. How many generations can you trace back from your parents? Can you include names, places of births, or birthdays?
Well, we've got some of it. Your grandfather can trace back to his grandfather. There were 7 brothers that all came to the United States from that side of the family. We know that some of them went to Canada, some went to New York, and some went to California. They changed their names when they came into the United States. It was Munsky when they were in Europe. And when they came to the U.S., a couple of them went to Rosansky, a couple went to Roseanne, and a couple went to Rosen. And then your grandfather's father in college changed it to Rose. He wanted to shorten it, so he said so that it could fit onto the forms. And then your grandfather, he actually is the first legally born Rose with the last name of Rose. And then on your grandmother's side, her father's name was Max Rappaport, and he came to the United States, or his family came to the United States in the 1860s from Lithuania. He settled in Chicago. He married a woman named either Miriam or Marion, and he worked as a mailman. And then his father's last name was Cavey. And then as far as birth dates, I know your grandma and grandpa's birth dates, but I don't know anyone before that. So your grandpa's birth date, he's born in October of 1923, and your grandma was born in March of 1931.
Okay. Do we have any veterans in our family?
Boy, we sure do. Your grandpa, who lives here in Raleigh, he's a World War II veteran, and he was part of the Army Air Corps. The Air Force and the Army were together as one unit at that point in time. He was a weatherman in the Army Air Corps.
And then my dad's grandfather was in World War II as well.
He was. You're right. Your dad's grandfather was also in World War II, and he flew B-28 bombers.
Yep. Okay, can you tell me any stories about our family?
I can tell you a few. Your grandfather was at the infamous Battle of the Bulge, and his brigade, can I say it? Followed in behind General Patton. So that was kind of cool, and he's got lots of stories about that. And then towards the end of the war in Germany, there were lots of gangs of youth that were out on the streets, and they would rob and beat up American soldiers. So when your grandfather was walking down the street one day, he was in uniform, full dress uniform, and he said he saw 4 of these guys across the street from him. And they started walking on an angle across the street towards him. So he knew that they were going to jump him, and so he took out his weapon. He had a gun, a revolver on him, and he held it up in the air, and he kind of waved it around and showed it to them. And next thing you know, the youth started walking back across the street, and they left him totally alone. So he was totally fine. And then another family story is how your grandma and your grandpa met. And they met at a temple dance in Chicago. It was a Friday night. Grandma went to the dance with a girlfriend of hers. Grandpa went with a couple of his friends. And when he looked across the room, in the room of all the people, he said to his friend, "I want you to introduce me to her." And when his friend said, "I don't know who she is," he said, "Well, please go find me someone that knows her so that you can introduce me to her." So once he got introduced, at that point, they danced and they talked all night long. And then Grandpa actually offered to drive Grandma back home to her apartment in Chicago, and she accepted. So she left her friend, and he left his friends, and he drove her home, but she was so scared, she was sitting all the way at the edge of the seat, hanging on to the door for dear life, just in case. So from that point forward, though, they dated, and they had met actually in August of 1949. They were engaged by December of 1949, and they were married in May of 1950. At that point, Grandma was only 19 and Grandpa was 26, and they'd already been to World War II and back.
Yep, and they're still together, 65
And they're still
years.
together, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Can you talk about any genealogical records we have?
We do have some. Your grandpa has done a big family tree, and he's gone back as far as he can, and he's got those locked away in a safe. And on your grandma's side, we just kind of jotted it all out on an envelope. So we've got some of the family records, but we don't have a whole lot of the family records. As Grandma likes to say, people just didn't talk about those things then. So we don't really know year of birth, year of death on most people, or what they even died from.
She claimed to have a very quiet, conservative family.
Definitely. And your grandpa, he was the only one in his family. He was the only child in his family. So it's kind of a small family tree, as he had no siblings, and your grandma on this side had only one other sibling. And then on your dad's side, his is a little bit bigger, but I don't know of any family tree. He's one of 5, and his father was one of 7. Mm-hmm. So it's a big family, but we don't have any kind of family tree records. So does that help?
Yep.
All right.
Thank
awesome.
you.
Good job.
Okay.